Yo, what's up? What's up, good people? Now, it's been a while since we done a wrestling story, but this is one that was very intriguing to me because a lot of people didn't know what took place behind the scenes. Uh, Everyone's favorite scene that you know it's it's a whole different experience when we see professional wrestling from the past and where it is now. Like this was the start. No holds barred was the start of opening a door because Hulk Hogan, who appeared 5 years previous in the movie Rocky 3, Mr. T, that was like 8 years. He wasn't even Hulk Hogan at the time. And he was in, I believe he just got with Vince, or he was still with AWA when he did the film. Where he played Thunder Lips. This is right on the verge of Vince McMahon getting the company from his father. And almost immediately, he turns wrestling upside down by taping in other people's areas, breaking the old traditional way, buying out the networks so that they would play their programming in their pre recorded matches and build his network of stars. He created a Super Bowl of an event for wrestling, WrestleMania, which brought over entertainers such as Mr. T, who was in the same film. And that catapulted everybody into Hollywood and wrestling, which wrestling was used as basically viewed as a backyard event. This made it something special. And Vince used that marketing tool to promote his wrestlers. He used Mr. T as his muse, and it was way in. His T was one of the biggest over characters in Hollywood, just his personality. He stood for good qualities. He was a marketing tool. Vince used that to model Hulk Hogan. All of a sudden, the wrestling toys came right after Mr. T. Mr. T had toys out and everything. Vince was not allowed to market Mr. T. He had his own licensing. So he couldn't do that. But with his wrestlers, he could. Then he decided, I'm going to cut out all of this music. Like they used to play Eye of the Tiger from Rocky 3. They used to play all these different songs from pop artists. But they had to pay the licensing fee to be able to play this music. And then once they were going to be billed for it, before they had an arrangement to where this was cool and accepted, now people want certain monies because it's on television and people are saying, well, my rights, this is my song. They decided we're going to make our own original records, our own theme songs for the wrestlers, and have the wrestlers perform. It was a success. Another genius of an idea. And you can't have Mr. T come back and battle Hulk Hogan. That wouldn't make sense. They were like brothers. This was Vince's idea for a movie called No Holds Barred. But at this time, in 1990, Mr. T's name is not what it used to be. He's not physically in the condition to play the role of a menacing human being. But was the brainchild of what Vince wanted to do. Controlled by an evil, maniacal executive like himself. Vince knew if the movie was going to be accepted, he couldn't make the movie about, he couldn't play the maniacal executive. He needed someone else to exuberate that. And he's too physically big himself to be the maniacal villain. No Holds Barred was supposed to be a match in the ring, then a match outside of it, where Hogan will fight the maniacal executive and find out that the maniacal executive was a Greco-Roman wrestler, a former retired all-pro wrestler. So you had the match, then you had the semi-match at the end with the villain. Well, Hogan was going to beat him. Now, you might say, well, what changed? Well, No Holds Barred making is one of the most extreme, hardest things that people had to go through. And when they had on actual look back on the film, it was all about we just got to sell Hulk Hogan. We're making this movie extra complicated. But this makes no difference. This is a Hulk Hogan movie. Stop changing what it truly is. Hogan was household synonymous, toys, merchandise. And after WrestleMania 3, he became the biggest thing in sports entertainment. He was on Sports Illustrated. He had took over wrestling. In 1987, Roddy Piper left WWE. Well, it was WWF at the time, but he left to go into movies. He did They Live. He was the first guy to do it, but Vince had nothing to do with it. So 3 years later, it was time. After WrestleMania 4's debacle, Vince and Hogan would often sit down and go over what they were going to do, as he was their vehicle in the WWF. So, as this vehicle, it was clear Hogan had vanished. Uh, Andre had all these problems physically. They didn't know how long Andre was going to last in the sport. They kept marketing Andre the Giant and used him for the entire year to go up against Hogan, they were gearing up for this movie called No Holds Barred, and it was going to be a Hulk Hogan movie, feature movie, with Hulk Hogan in it, action, everything. Vince was going to spare no expense. This is going to be the next great idea of Vince. The movies. Now, he jumped full speed ahead and said, okay, we'll reduce your matches, make movies, and while you're away, this will build up the rest of the wrestling world. So, Andre the Giant ended up getting the championship from Hogan on a Saturday night's main event. And they had this big controversy who was the real referee, as Earl Hebner had a twin brother and they used him for the skit. They used the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, like he paid for plastic surgery. It was two of them in the ring, and it made for an epic storyline that was very well played off. Now, because of this, Vince was like, we got to put Macho Man Randy Savage in this thing. And Hogan declined. He says, well, we don't want to make it obvious that this is a WWE movie. They're going to look at it as that. This is a Hulk Hogan action movie with the character not named Hulk Hogan. His name will be Rip. But we want to have him different than Hulk Hogan. It's Hulk Hogan movie, but it's not Hulk Hogan. So his name was changed. His colors were different. He wore blue and sky blue and white. You know, he still had the headband. He still had all those things going for him. But it wasn't Hulk. It was Rip. So as they were writing this thing, Hogan didn't get the credit for all the changes that was made in it. Hogan had just had become a father. You know, Linda had just had a baby, and Hogan was like, okay, after WrestleMania 4, I'm going to take a break. So everyone thought Hogan was getting the belt back at WrestleMania 4, and they moved the belt to Savage. So Randy would be the champion and could hold the floor till he got back, because Macho Man and Hogan were friends. And he knew Macho Madness and everything was over. You know, the madness took over. So having Macho Man as the baby face was working. You know, people loved him, Elizabeth, and where they were, and Macho Man as the champion was you know was it for wrestling at that time. Hulkamania took a back seat, and when Hogan out of the picture, they would begin to go film No Holds Barred. So working on this film was something that was due to come out in the summer of '89. And to everyone's shock, it was the number 2 most popular movie. They debuted at number 2 at the release, shocking the world. A wrestling movie with Hulk Hogan was number 2 at the box office. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was the only thing topping it. But how did we get the characters? What happened? Well, there was an audition and they were going through actors. And when Vince saw Tiny Lester Jr., who's better known as Debo now, but back then he saw him in a couple of movies and he saw this guy in a film called Armed and Dangerous. It just happened to be on television or cable network. And they saw this guy's size, his athleticism, and he says, "Who is that guy with his eye going in the other direction? Is that for the movie or is that real?" Vince saw him one time and told him, "I need you to gain 20, 30 pounds of muscle. I'm going to put you with my team." And they build him up, Tiny Tony Lister, to be Zeus, the human wrecking machine. Vince gave him the name, everything. So Tiny Lester was never that size that he was when he fought Hulk Hogan. But to be as menacing as Hulk Hogan, because Hogan's pretty big, he had to be equal or on that same even keel. So he went through a weight training program. Uh, Vince and the wrestling guys got to him, gave him some creatine and all these things, and he bulked up to look like a professional wrestler. And he told him, "How much do you make per film?" He told him the amount, and Vince said, "Okay, you're a professional wrestler or an actor. But anyway, just think of this as an acting gig that pays more." So he paid him handsomely. He gave him limo chauffeur. He stayed in the best hotels. He was living better than every professional wrestler on the card that wasn't Hulk Hogan. And he just walked through the door. Now, while they were filming the movie, he was a huge part of the fear into the audience. They needed someone that could generate that fear for Hulk Hogan's safety, for everything. And watching the film, they did a great job of making it look very intense, fearful. Now, in the original setting, in the early draft of the script, Hogan was supposed to suffer a broken arm, Zeus, or dislocated arm. He pulls his arm out of socket. One yank of Zeus's power dislocates the Hulk's shoulder. So Hulk had to slam him with one arm. And he slammed him so hard he went through the mat. Hogan saw this as ridiculous. Hogan says, "No, I'm going to write and choreographer the last fight scene." So Kickboxer had just come out. And they were having auditions for guys to play Vince. And having the Greco Roman wrestler, Hogan thought that's too cliched and that would take away from the fight with him and Zeus. Me and Zeus should be the main event. If I got to beat him to get to the main boss, and the main boss is as formidable as Zeus, that defeats the point and the purpose. So you lose everything. This guy has to be just a fiery, wimpy guy that hides behind his money. It feels he can get anything he wants because he has it. And Kurt Fuller gives one of his best performances ever as Braille, who often used the phrase, Jock ass. Battle of the tough guys. The worst name you could ever have. Now, so the script ended up being a carbon copy ripoff, the final scenes of basically the movie that came out previous, which was called Kickboxer, where John Claude Van Damme, his brother's in a wheelchair, they kidnap him, and then they're holding him hostage until, you know, the match go the way they want by the evil promoter. They use that part for this final script. In the final scene, as the producer kidnaps Hawk's woman, holds her hostage, the brother's in a wheelchair, so you have that sympathy, and they got away with it. This was clear perjury. There was a scene in this movie where some random guy just tries to R word the girl that is the love interest played by Joan Severance, who was a Hollywood pass around. Now, Joan Severance, this is like one of her first roles in starting in movies. Uh, but she was like an industry pass around girl. You know, she acted. Her biggest role was her acting with um, Kevin Spacey, with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder in Hear No Evil, See No Evil, where she has a nude scene that caught a lot of people's attention. But in this film, Joan Severance plays the spoiled little girl who has this preconceived notion of wrestlers, only to turn around and change her whole thoughts of opinions once she sees, Hogan and everything about him. And she falls in love and blah, 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 blah. Right? Going into this whole thing, they have a scene where she almost gets R worded. And Kickboxer, they R word Van Damme's girlfriend, the bad guy does, to try to break his will before the match. And they do all of these different antics, to try to make, a lot of this stuff worthwhile. So the movie becomes a little colluded with just scenes that they made just for action. They were showing him, Hogan, trying to build up his image that he loves everybody. He's in like the hood, going to the old town restaurant to go eat. And there was a lot of Hulk Hogan going out to eat in this movie. It was pretty interesting to see. Now, let's get to the things people didn't really understand. Jessica Body Ventura, who had just done Predator, had came back to do this scene, for the movie where they were commentators. Him, me, Gene Okerlund, and everything else. Now, because he had Predator and was doing his thing there, Vince McMahon was mad he took time out to do Predator. Often saw this as a man, this movie became a mega hit. and they were able to market it and show trailers and everything. It was a way to cross brand. So this helped Vince get a lot of good gracious appeal with the movie corporations and the people that were going to support the film and put things out. Now, as this was going on, Hogan comes back to wrestling. As this movie is over, the movie's filmed, it's recorded. Now it's time to promote the film. So as the movie is promoted, it's time getting almost ready for WrestleMania 5. Hogan comes out and he's basically Macho's the champion. He comes out and helps Macho Man. They become a tag team item called the Mega Powers. And they basically run the angle of Paul Orndorff and Hulk Hogan when they teamed up. Whenever Hogan teams up with somebody, it normally ends bad in a breakup. But this time, once again, it's the heavyweight champion with Macho Man. So all of this excitement is going on. It's surrounding the event. Andre is basically doing one type matches where he's barely in the ring because he could barely move. So Savage and Hogan breaks up, and WrestleMania 5 comes around. So as WrestleMania 5 is rearing its head, Hogan versus Macho Man. Macho is to give the belt back to Hogan. Hogan's back being the champion. So Hogan's got the belt. He's the star again. Macho, who did not want to give the belt back over, who was a great champion and was holding the belt wonderfully and defending it, and held the ship down till Hogan came back. There really wasn't much of a dip without Hogan. They know we can't just let Macho go back to being a beltless wrestler. We owe it to him to have something. So this king of wrestling thing came about. He didn't want to be Intercontinental Champion anymore. He felt he was bigger than that. And with the Ultimate Warrior and Honky Tonk Man, those guys fighting for that belt, he felt, Macho felt, and he was rightfully so. I can't go to the heavyweight champion down to the Intercontinental Championship. So I need something to suffice. So the king of wrestling was created. And once George the Animal Steel won it and Macho beat him and got the belt, well, got the crowning of king and it was being passed on, he was the Macho King. And once he was the Macho King, it was a whole different thing. There was a scepter. There was a whole new revived into what he would become. No Holds Barred comes out. The movie's getting ready, the promotions, everything's out. Hogan's got the strap. So now every card is about promoting this movie, as Vince has tied his hip to it. So now everyone wants to own and have a piece of this movie, and all the wrestlers, everything is about promoting this. So when everyone sees how slimy and maniacal this character is. And as they're building it up, they bring Tiny Lester into the ring as Zeus. And he hits Hogan on the shoulders. Uh, and he just starts damaging. He puts Hulk Hogan, knocks him out, hurts him, and just terrifying just looking at him. But he couldn't speak. You know, his monologues was dry and just like, because that's what the character was. So there was no real dialogue with him. So to make the movie go over better, they said we need to put him with Macho. Macho Man could do his dialogues for him, and this will be the most terrifying thing in wrestling. Kids were petrified of this. They didn't know how Hulk Hogan would fare against this guy. Tickets were selling through the roof. So as the movie comes out, Vince is so enamored with all the attention. Vince goes ahead and decides to come up with another great idea. Now the great idea has changed to this is going to ride all the way out. And they continuously ride this Zeus wave. Now, Vince was so excited that all the other wrestlers were bumped. All the other like storylines were wiped for Zeus. As I told you, he had first class hotel rooms, limos, transportations. He had everything. Now, with that being said, the human wrecking machine that is known as Zeus, he was a little bit, what I would say, concerned about like his, time off into this. And Vince was like, "You're making way more money. You're more active. If you find anything lucrative acting wise, take it." Meanwhile, you're Zeus, the human wrecking machine. We'll put you in matches. We'll put you in matches you can work, and just basic moves is all you need to know, and that's it. You're a big man. You're a powerhouse. That's all you worry about. So they protected Zeus. They didn't give him anything hardly to do except for choke, slap himself across the arm. It sold. He was selling fear. As nothing Hulk Hogan could do could hurt him. Hogan would hit him. He would just laugh it off. He got slammed. Nothing was hurting Zeus. He was truly the human wrecking machine. Hogan had never seen anything like it. So a real match with Zeus was being the underlining theme and the whole storyline. Vince's, well, here's the storyline. You're mad because you were supposed to get the win in the movie, and it's changed. They even brought Kurt Fuller in for an interview where he revised his role as Braille, pitching that they had it in contract that Zeus was supposed to beat Hogan, and they changed it at the end, making the film. Hogan changed the whole fight scene near the end anyway, because that's what originally happened. The original script, Hogan always is going to win the fight. Um, with the Greco-Roman wrestler promoter was not going to work. They went with Kurt Fuller, who Hogan never touches. He ends up electrocuting himself. But Hogan wrote all of that ending of the wrestling part of how the match was going. and he went back to his double X handle smash over the head. That used to be Hogan's finishing move in his earlier days of wrestling. It wasn't the big boot and the leg drop. That came like when he got to WWE, but that double axe handle across the forehead used to be his finishing move. He made it as the rip finishing move in the movie No Holds Barred, as they try to separate the identity of Hulk Hogan and this character Rip. He uses that move in Japan. When he went to Japan to wrestle, Hogan would use a lot of different moves and techniques when he was over there that he rarely showed in WWE. Now, with that being said, we go into the final stage of No Holds Barred. Now, as this film was going around and being made, and all of these different scenes was taking place, Hogan has a great emotional scene in the movie where he actually cries when his supposed brother is in the ring. I mean, is in the hospital, and he has this teared up moment. It's a generic movie, but overall effective. It did what it was supposed to do, entertain the kids. And the nature of it was Hulk Hogan being this action star. And he was a wrestler who's also the action star of the people and the little man. So he kills Zeus in the movie with an axe handle, knocking him off the top. Zeus falls into the middle of the ring and dies in the movie. Now, as they were going through the real wrestling, fast forward back to the wrestling, to where Hogan's got the belt again, and they're running this angle promoting the No Holds Bar. This was supposed to continue on. All the wrestlers are pissed. They're treating, you know, Zeus a little differently. They were cool with him, but now they're jealous. Jake the Snake was cool with him, but still envious. There were other wrestlers who weren't too excited and happy for him, like I believe the Big Boss Man was not nice to him. There was a lot of other wrestlers that were involved that wasn't too keen to being cool with him. Bundy really didn't speak to him or didn't deal with it. Uh, they had a lot of wrestlers there, and they just didn't quite feel he paid any dues, and that's natural for wrestlers who just feel like, who's this guy coming in getting all this money with Hulk Hogan? This guy isn't, he doesn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch, and here he comes getting all this money with Hogan. We've been here all this time, busting our butt, getting on this small bus. This guy's got first class plane tickets. We're crammed in a bus. He's getting, carte blanche for everything. And they hated it. The wrestlers completely hated it. So he felt it, he knew it, but nobody really too much did anything. Jake wasn't gonna say anything to him. He would talk to him and kind of help him out, be cool with him. But a lot of wrestlers were you know res- resenting the push he got. Now let's look at the other environment, the other situation that took place. Vince is happy with the way all the success of the movie is doing in the box office. He's ready to make WrestleMania Zeus versus Hogan. 1-on-1, first time ever. For real. So they ended up doing a no holds barred, and Vince and Zeus ended up not agreeing on, going forward because Vince is like, okay, the movie's over, the no holds barred, steel cage pay per view. Well, let's just say it didn't perform well. He wanted to do the movie and the match on a pre recorded event. And they weren't going to put it in a steel cage. A lot of people, pay per view at that time was not as drawn out as as everybody wouldn't run to see pay per view. People felt like I've already seen the movie. I don't need to have the match in the movie. So, it was one of those situations where it just didn't do well. Plus, it was like a house card in like Nashville, and that changed a lot of plans, especially when Zeus expected a lot of the expenditures to extend. But during this time, the popularity rise of the Ultimate Warrior was just booming. It was dwarfing this Hogan and and Zeus situation that was going nowhere, with Macho Man and Hogan just going back and forth. The Ultimate Warrior was going upwards. So by them torpedoing Macho Man just to give the belt back to Hogan so he can go ahead and continue the same trajectory he was on, now it's like we got another problem. Something bigger than life. And that problem ended up being, what do we do now with this phenom that is taking over the wrestling? The Ultimate Warrior. If we don't have this guy as a main event, what the hell are we doing? His numbers are skyrocketing over Hogan's because we staled Hogan down with this Zeus guy, and we've dragged this thing all the way along. Like we're gonna put this thing at WrestleMania, and this guy can't wrestle. He hasn't learned any new moves. What are we gonna do, Vince? We can't put this at WrestleMania. Well, the thing is, Vince is going into the movie business, and he needs to take Hogan and get him ready for the next movies. That's the plan. We need Hawk for the next movies. But I can't have Hawk in the next movies and we do a dud at WrestleMania. This has got to be epic. So instead of Zeus, they terminate the whole Zeus project after that. Zeus never wrestled again in WWF. That was it. He was out. The whole Zeus thing was over. After No Holds Barred, we never got Hogan and Zeus 1-on-1. Even though in like I think it was WCW, they got Zeus to come back for like a battle royal with Flair, and right there he was Z Gangster or something. Now, a lot of times had passed, and now Hogan was gonna battle, the Ultimate Warrior, champion versus champion, never before done. Now, Hogan had never been the Intercontinental Champion. So Hogan would have two belts, and that was that. Right? There's never been a champion versus champion. Now, with that being done, that changed everything. Zeus was going to beat Hogan in WrestleMania 6. That's how it was going to go. Hogan was going to be injured in WrestleMania 6 and go off to do movies. And it was going to come back after that to regain the title and beat Zeus, the human recognition. Now, problem. After all of this was worked out, Hogan didn't mind dropping the belt to Zeus, but it had to be an interesting match. And their concerns of Zeus not able to pull off a 15-minute match would definitely hurt WrestleMania as a main event. So the rise of the Ultimate Warrior was too great. And to have Hogan versus Warrior, champion versus champion, was the best thing they could ever do. Two baby faces facing off to see who was going to lead professional wrestling. And to have Hogan get beat fair and square in the ring. No cheap tricks, nothing. It marked an end of an era officially. And it was the Warriors' turn, and that was it. I never thought Hulk Hogan would lose. I just like, okay, he's gonna Hulk up, he's gonna do his big boot, drop the leg drop. And once I saw the Warrior get out of the way, that was it. That made wrestling history for me. To see the Warrior beat Hulk Hogan fair and square. Then, of course, we got Suburban Commando, we got a whole bunch of crap. But then they had to steal the belt back because of the war and make a horrible WrestleMania where Sergeant Slaughter was thrown in there as he was representing the Iraqis and Hogan was representing the United States of America. And from that point on, WrestleMania was headed down the toilet. So, hope you enjoyed it. I want to say shouts out to HD, shouts out to Nicholas Jacobs, shout out to Jag Sport with Jose Rodriguez. So, on that note, I'm out.